Hi.
So, for the third time, hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of SAHAJ Times podcast. My name is Lele, I think you know by now, and with me for the first time this month,
Yeah, in a
Fabrizio, my
while.
co-host. It's been
Very
a
nice to
while.
be back. Yes, I missed you guys very much. But I've been following all the short, very nice episodes. Good job. I think they're doing quite well.
Yeah, they are doing quite well, and actually, you haven't missed anything because you usually do your monthly episode. It's
Yes.
just we are now turning into weekly episodes, which is basically just me and Fabrizio whenever he can. For sure, is gonna be there for at least one episode per month. This is what we wrote on the contract. But this is also a reminder because you can become a guest of the episode, or you can also suggest a guest. So there will be like a link in the description that will direct you to the form where you can sign up and become the next guest of Such Times podcast. So really interesting. You can also ask a private episode just with Fabrizio if
only if you're subscribed and you've liked at least 10 episodes. I think that was the contract, wasn't it?
yeah. You're way better than me at doing this. I never really do that. So if you want to like and subscribe, I mean, feel free to do whatever you want. We've been talking about this episode for like 2 years, and now the
Yes,
time has come to make it happen.
it's
And
happening.
what are we going to talk about today,
So
Fabri?
today I'm super excited because we're talking about something I know very little of, and I'm super happy to learn more. We're going to talk about Puja Protocol, and maybe this can also be the beginning of something long term, maybe different types of protocols, havens, or different things in the collective. It's, as Lele said, something that we've been asked a lot, and I think there's a lot of value in it. So, without further ado, we can introduce our guest, which is Uncle Pascal, or Uncle Pas, from some of the connections that we have in London. He received his certification in 1989, and he's from the collective the UK London. And fun fact, he's a West Ham supporter. Welcome, Uncle.
Welcome,
Thank
Uncle.
you. Thank you for inviting me. I don't know whether to thank you to inviting me. This is a real subject where sometimes it feels like there's a fire ready to consume.
Yes.
But anyway, we'll do our best and give you
be,
what
be
information.
careful what you say.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah.
So, we received many questions actually for this episode, lots of questions, very interesting ones as well. So we made a little list, and of course, be sure to know that Lele is gonna ask you something that is not on the questions, that is completely off topic and curveball during the program.
Probably West Ham related, but we'll see.
Football related question. But let's start a bit with actually something that it was quite obvious. Actually, I also wanted to ask that is like, what is the basic, let's say, sequencing that we should know about puja? Let's say I am from the Fiji Islands, right? And there's 6 yogis, and I'm in charge of the puja, and I'm not sure what to do. Where do I start? What is the basic I should know? Let's say.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward and simple. I mean, first of all, in the old days, pujas were done by different Sajogis who were around Shemataji. And of course, as maybe you guys have heard, Shemataji sometimes hired a Brahmin, to come and do pujas. And so with all this, when Shemataji obviously would instigate everything and tell everybody, whoever was around her, what to do and how to do, so it was a lot of time. And around about 86, Antonio got more involved with Shemataji's consent because she called him to.
Yeah.
So in that way, he started to do pujas more often. And so when I came along, which was in 1989, I went to Davy Puja in Margate, and I knew, of course, my brother, but
Mm.
also I knew Chris Patmore. Chris Patmore was also very much involved
Yeah.
later on with Antonio. So I went over and had a look, and I was watching, what they were doing, and they were packing up at that time. So as time went by, I lived with Chris Patmore. We shared a house with another Sajogi. And so I started to learn about the puja protocols, how you offer puja. Now, these were the raw times, were the times when, pujaris were started to be set. There was people that were doing it constantly. And
Yeah.
of course, Mataji would travel far away and they couldn't go. And of course, people close to Shmataji would help her and she would instigate everything, tell them everything to do. So the Puja protocol was the run-ins was, of course, Shmataji would come, you'd welcome Shmataji with a garland, arti, you know,
Yeah.
and then she'll give a speech. And after the speech, there'll be the Ganesha Puja, where the children will come up, wash Mataji's feet. And they used to wash mother's feet with their hands, a lot of the times to start with when I first saw the process. And then after that, there'll be the Amrut.
Yeah.
The Amrut will be poured on Shemataji, whether it would be her hands or Shemataji's feet. It would vary according to Shemataji's will, you know and every puja she would instigate what. So after that, the Amrut, the girls would come up, and that would be the unmarried girls would come up, and Shemataji would show them and instigate how to decorate her feet, and so that would be the unmarried girls, and then of course the married ladies would come up and they would have a sari and create a kind of barrier. And after the Gowrie, then obviously mother would be dressed with the ornaments and being given not just the ornaments, but also the fruits, the oti, which is, all the different elements put together.
Yeah.
And then the sari would drapes over Shemataji and the crown would go on, and then she would finish her makeup, and then voila, and
Wow.
that's the different phases. So you'd have Sri Ganesha Puja, which was wash Shemataji's feet. Then you had the Amruts be poured on Shemataji. Then you'd have the Gowrie Puja, we call it Gowrie Puja, where the unmarried girls would come and decorate mother's feet. And then at the same times, almost simultaneously,
Yeah.
you would have the Devi Puja, which is the Devi, but also in the aspect of whatever deity you'll be worshipping. So we'd be dressing Shemataji, of course, as the Devi, but also the influence will be whatever deity you'll be worshipping. For example, the sari would be a dark blue because you're worshipping Krishna or something, or red with gold if you're worshipping the
Yeah.
Devi, which is the the Durga aspect. So, as a Devi puja, but it's also the aspect of the god or the deity whom you're worshipping. You're bringing that aspect out. So these are the steps, you would say, the fine steps. So this is how we've learned it, so when I was getting involved in that 90s, these two were the main characters for me. you know
Yeah.
it was Antonio, Chris Patmore, and of course there will be some others who'd come and go, or be involved for a few pujas and then disappear, but these were the main characters. So from London, I learned everything about the aspect of puja, and this is where we still maintain the same flow, where we do exactly as we did in the early 90s, and even before that when these others were these other two characters are doing it, Antonio and Chris Patmore were with mother. So you'd have the Ganesha, the Amrut, the Gauri Puja, the Devi Puja, and the offerings in that time. So, and the Arti.
Yeah, this is actually quite well connected to another question that came up, which I thought was quite interesting.
Mm.
Somebody asked, did the puja protocol evolve a bit throughout the year? Like, how was it at the beginning? How is it a bit different now? Like, and not necessarily in a bad way, yeah, but
No,
like,
no, not at all. Not at all.
was there a transformation or an expansion or something along those
Yeah,
lines?
from my perspective, you see, when I hear the old days, and then when I got involved, watching, seeing, and then the progression, because in the early days, of course, Shamaji will be instigating everything. She'll be making sure that people did everything around her. So her attention was very motherly, teaching everybody, making sure that things were done correctly. As it moved on, the responsibility came more to the Sahajogis, and mother's attention could expand more towards the whole collective,
Nice.
So then what happened, of course, in the aspect of, let's say, the washing of mother's feet, the children would rub mother's feet. But then at one point we stopped that because the water became valuable, very valuable to us
Mhm.
in pure form, because we used to use it for the Amrut as
Yeah,
well, and also for people to
yeah,
drink and
yeah,
whatever. Before that, when they used to rub, we used to only use the water to anoint people's heads
yeah.
or vibrate areas and whatever So that was one aspect, that maneuvered and changed. Then the other aspect, of course, the Amrut, where at one point, you see, this is quite miraculous in one way. There was me, Antonio, Chris Patmore on stage with Shmataji, and we've been doing pujas for years. Now, one puja, we went through the whole process. We went through the whole puja, the crowning, everything. And we sat back. Then after the puja, we realized we've all forgotten to offer the Amrut. Now, the Amrut is not an easy thing to forget because, you have a big bowl and then loads of
Yes.
milk. For some reason, she took us beyond thought.
Yeah,
And because at that point, it was not necessary to do this to mother anymore. It's something that we were given as a process, but it doesn't have to be on her. So we didn't have to always, uh, you know, put it on Shamaji. She could pull back a bit more.
hmm,
So, and then also with the Gowrie aspect, because in the West, especially in the early days, people didn't realize what Gowrie meant, or unmarried girls. So it used to be very confusing on stage with sometimes divorcees, would
mm,
come up and thinking they're unmarried. But obviously, as the Indians would know, a girl means a virgin,
yeah,
someone
yeah,
who's, and so that's who would be, painting and anointing her feet.
exactly.
It became very confusing. So eventually, in that moment, then Shamaji got the women involved, the two ladies, which was Al Ganesha, and also Anita came along as well, and started showing the girls. But then in the end, they did it all,
Mm,
and the girls would, just rub
yeah,
the altar within
yeah,
themselves. So, and then that slowly dissipated as well, to call these girls, because again, we don't have to obligate mother and throw this. She doesn't need puja. It was
yeah,
something that she gave us a system, but then she didn't need it onto herself.
yeah,
So that also kind of dissipated and moved away. But like I said, in London, in England, we were doing the pujas as we always have done. So we kept that tradition. where we'd still do the Gauri Puja with girls. We
Yeah.
will still allow girls to come and decorate mother's feet. So we didn't remove it just because Shemataji removed it. And we
Yeah.
didn't remove the amulet just because Shemataji didn't do it anymore,
Yeah.
you know, on her person. We kept
Yeah.
the systems, and that was very important because as times moved on, these things, we didn't have to, it's like Shemataji, from my perspective, it was like she was very motherly to start with,
Yeah.
guiding, very loving, very forgiving, always attentive with her children around her to make sure they don't do too many mistakes, because of course, they didn't know much. So
Yes.
then later on, she became a little bit more, came out as a guru, you
Yeah.
know, where she could relax a bit more and use her powers, like I said, to the audience, to the Sahajogis all there, or go beyond in a universal way, So you can see her attention goes deeper into the guru aspect. And then you felt that another step came where she became the goddess, you know. So all this stuff you put on her is fine. She didn't mind, but she didn't have to have it. So at
Yeah.
various times, little things got dropped off, you
Yeah.
know. But as far, like I said, as far as we knew in our tradition was the steps were still there and we kept them there,
Yeah.
because they felt important,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
mean, I also feel this is the Capricorn in me. I also feel there has to be a pragmatic element to things. For example, I don't know. Here in Switzerland, we are a collective of 200 people when we do pujas. So we invite children and yuvas up to 25 to wash Shimaji's feet.
Yeah.
Now, if you are in a country where there is 12 million yogis and
Yeah.
you're doing the puja, and there is already 1,500 kids, you're not going to invite the yuvas to wash the feet, right? Because there's an element also of practicality to what we do. It has to
Well,
make sense.
absolutely. And Shemataji did create that
Yeah.
because, after a while, she only had children that could walk by themselves,
Yes.
or 5 to 12 and things like that. So
Exactly.
she also
It
maneuvered.
evolved even that. Yeah. Exactly.
Absolutely, of course, we here, we still have the ability to allow all the children, including new babies. There's nothing sweeter than after a mother has gone through her 40 days, taking her child to the first puja and
Yes.
been able to wash Humanity's feet,
Yeah. Yeah.
and of course, we tend to allow children to rub mother's feet, because the essence here, is that, and also we sometimes as well put perfume oil within the water, because when a child comes up, a lot of the times the touching, the feeling, and also the smell resonate within the child. He doesn't maybe see at that point, but later on, these feelings develop a devotion. It's like when you get a fragrance, a perfume,
Yeah.
you immediately relate that to mother because you've had that experience
You've
at her.
experienced it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it brings that devotion, that things back. So the sweet things like that we still do because, obviously in the West, we're deprived of devotion,
It's
you
true.
know, and so to bring that aspect back into the young ones, where it's okay, to be devoted, to have this aura or sweetness where you go up to and rub the feet and whatever,
It's actually it's the essence of Saja Yoga. No? I mean, actually, it's very sweet you say that. This thing about the fragrance and the grace, because
Mm.
at home, our boys went to Kabbalah school and to Kanajari, and it's very sweet. Every time we ask them to prepare the meditation, every single time, what they want to do is to wash the picture of Shimaji, clean
Yeah,
the altar, and worship her.
yeah,
And it makes me so happy because what in our attention as parents, it's like we're gonna do a workshop, we're gonna futsal, we want
yeah,
to clean you and make you
yeah,
progress,
yeah,
right? But they just have this heart for Shimaraji, and it just manifests. And it's
yeah,
exactly what you said. Once you've done, because in the schools they did it so well and they experienced that devotion so well, and now
mm,
it's natural. A
yeah,
smell and odor, it leads you to that, and it's
yeah.
beautiful.
You see, it gives you an emotional connection. Where
Exactly.
this is where we have a problem with, how to connect with Shemataji, with a photograph. Well, by all these elements, or touching, smelling, the feel, creates deep emotions. I mean, you don't see it much in children, but like you said, when they actually come away from that environment, then you see it in them slowly.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
the beauty why we kept that aspect, what I mean, because of the thing. And then of course on the Amaret side, I know there's a question between, the how you put the elements and how you
Yeah.
offer the elements. And of course, the beauty, Shemataji was very practical. I mean, you say that to any old Sajogi, and they will tell you how the practicalities of that divine form, how he expressed itself, was amazing. For example, you got the five elements. You got ghee, you got
Yeah.
honey, you got yogurt, you got milk, and then you got sugar. And Shemataji added some saffron within the sugar.
Yeah.
Okay, so five elements, but the saffron was added a little bit. Now, when you pour the ghee, and Shemataji would rub the ghee all over her hands, for example, would rub it everywhere. Now, ghee has a way of penetrating onto your skin. So when you pour the honey, then the honey just runs through. It doesn't become sticky, and your hands will become all sticky and
Yeah.
gooey. And it's hard to wash off as well, even with warm water and whatever.
Yeah.
So, so the practicality is that you put ghee first, and then the honey would run through, and then you'd have the yogurt where mother would run it through, a little bit of water rinsing it on each element, and then after that you'd have the milk, but finally you'll have the sugar. Now the sugar has the ability to take off all the ghee as
Mm.
well, because she would rub it into her hands, and the sugar would absorb, with the saffron, would absorb all the remaining ghee around, and then when you wash, it's all flown. So the practicality of how the
Of the
elements
process.
of
Yeah.
the process, she gave it to us, and the reasons, when you worked it out, you kind of go, oh, the practic. She is Maha practical. It's just beyond, and of course, the vibes that flows from it. It's tremendous. From
Wow.
that. So that's the five elements, and also the reasons why they are in that order. Now, of course, the subtleties of the elements, you know, Shemataji has mentioned a few times, you know, um, the ghee, is the butter, and when you offer it to God, it cleanses your shuddhi.
Yeah.
But the little booklet I will send, a booklet on protocol, has a lot of these things from Shemataji, which
Nice.
people, if your audience want to, I'll send it to you guys, and you can distribute it as
Absolutely.
you know, because it has all these little aspects in there, and when you read it and it's come straight from Shemataji, it all makes sense, and it's pretty straightforward and easy stuff. Shemataji made puja incredibly simple. Considering sometimes what you've read in some of the books, the amount of worship you have to do with a plate or the different ornaments and different
Yeah.
things, 1,008 times this and 1,008 times that, morning, noon, evening, but she's created an immense and a very simple but profound thing that works within our system. You know, everything, works in our system. Yeah.
Perfect.
So that was on that front. Of course, the Gowrie aspect, as I said, the Gowrie aspect was because obviously it became a bit chaotic, and a lot of the girls as well that came up, they were such in awe that they couldn't even hold their hands still. The awe
Wow.
much, and so it became quite difficult for them to actually create swastikas that would be and that's why you saw the married ladies got more involved and behind the scene and took over, and then for mother's practicality as well, that was easy. She didn't have to worry about
Yeah.
mistakes and problems, and
Or
then
pointing how to do things, because yeah,
absolutely and constantly having to guide. Then
which I think, sorry, Uncle, I think this is something almost in every collective now is also done anyway. You have oftentimes different people that come for the Devi Puja, but there's always those one, two that stand in the front and guide them to explain them what to do. Right? It's become a
yeah,
tradition a bit everywhere.
it has, yeah, to and we try and still still call the unmarried girls, and
Yeah,
then the aunties would help and guide them through. Even though these days, like in UK, I mean, if we call the unmarried girls, all we have to do is leave the tray there. They are so versed now
yeah,
what to do, so we don't even have to really be there and guide them so much, you know, just making sure that they got everything they need. And so in our pujas, they're kind of left to their own device, and but you see the love and devotion when they are left alone, because
yeah,
they use their understanding of what to do, how to do the swastikas. They teach each other, they talk to each other and
yeah,
create, and it becomes a beautiful thing because it becomes the girls and Shrimataji. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? And
It's a
it's really,
connection.
yeah, and it's a deep connection between the Gowries, because the Gowrie is something that we're losing in the West,
Yeah,
and and it's an aspect which obviously we want to imbibe or create or re-establish in the Western world, especially the Gowrie aspect where people are proud to.
yeah,
But yeah, so that was the Gowrie, and of course, like I said, on the Devi aspect, we call it Devi Puja, and it is Devi Puja, where mother gets the toe toe rings, the
yeah,
anklets, the various different ornaments around the neck and whatever you. And most important, of course, is the Mangala Sutra, which a young boy would offer. And a
yeah,
young boy, because obviously he's a young lad, he's a 12-year-old boy,
yeah,
so it's a perfect person to offer the goddess the Mangala Sutra of the marriage,
yeah,
you know, and the sari and the crowning. So this nowadays, what we do, we try to offer the sari first. The reason is because when you decorate mother, and sometimes it's cumbersome to try and offer the sari afterwards, and also I don't think this is obviously open to people's ways of doing it, and they can. But also, I find that as a Sajogi in the audience, you're sitting there, if you got a veil in front of you, it kind of like it's almost like a barrier and disturbing in some ways. But when you put the sari on and then you make all the offerings, it feels like you're involved.
mm,
As an audience, you're involved in everything that's going on stage, but not just looking it up on the screen because there's a camera,
yeah.
because you want it to be real,
The
you know,
attention has to work.
yeah,
Yeah,
your attention be there, and you see the movement of whatever. You may not see everything, but just by you having that gaze upon the throne and whatever's happening, it just feels you become one with the puja.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, when Mother was with us, of course, veiling her was a great thing, because when you're dressing someone, when you're putting ornaments or when you're putting makeup on, it's private. The goddess is, but
Yeah.
then when you put the sari and suddenly, she's there in full form,
Yeah.
you know, then everyone goes into like an awe,
Yeah.
and you get that wow, that blast.
Mhm.
That was beautiful at that time, because there was a transformation where
Wow.
you had Mother and then you had the goddess, with all her splendor.
Wow.
But this time, with a photo and what have you, I personally don't feel the necessary to hold the sari up so much. I think it's nice to make the offering and then make all the other offerings of the
Mm.
toe rings and the anklets, the little chains where you put
Yeah.
them on the chair, the bangles and what have you. And even sometimes they put a little bit of oil onto the photo and the bindi. So and that makes you feel you're sucked in, you're part of it,
Yeah.
because it's opened, it's all there for you to just gaze upon and be part of, and that's very important, to be part of, not disconnected. Like if you at puja and you close your eyes, and you're meditating, well, I mean, okay, do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
being opened and
Yeah.
being visual, being one with what's going on, with the flow of things,
Exactly.
actually, it sucks much more of your awareness
Yeah.
into the form, into formless.
I mean, if we could all laser beam in the same point together as a collective, then that's powerful. That's
Absolutely.
what you want in a puja.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, to cover, and forcing people to shut their eyes because they don't want to, you know, then that was a personal thing. And
Yeah.
I find that that's how we flow in England. We flow in that way, which
Hmm.
is, not the way we used to do it with Mother, agreed, but Mother changed things in her way, you know what
Things
I mean?
evolved. Yeah.
We can also evolve things too. And I'm sure in the future, there will be people with much more in-depth understanding of, you know, being one with her and making offerings and things that are far beyond what we know now, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the process, with the Davy and then the offerings, Now I know, we gave a big bowl of fruits, that's well known around all the Eastern, that you give fruits or vegetations to the god in order for prosperity to come back to you, and you give the bowl, which is normally the oti. The oti is like a tray with, normally it's the petticoat. No, the blouse piece. Sorry, I keep always getting
Hmm.
that. The blouse piece. We cut the blouse piece and form it into a triangle, and that goes in the oti tray, which normally has a coconut, rice, and haldi, and a bit of turmeric, with
Hmm.
a little bit of kumkum just on the side, and that gets offered as, but nowadays we put it onto the dry fruits and dried nuts,
Yeah.
dry fruits. So we have a big, and then we'll put the blouse piece within on that with the coconut and rice, and make that as an offering as an oti, you
Very
know.
nice.
But oti means a tray of offerings, whichever the offerings they are,
It's the offering. Yeah.
So, whether you have bangles, whether you have coconut or, little auspicious various things, like we said, nutmeg is an auspicious little herb, with turmeric and
Yeah.
kumkum, of course,
Lele, what's going on through your mind?
Too many questions, and also because we are just at the first one. And I'm interesting about the do's and don'ts during the puja. For example, there are things that we cannot offer to Shimadaji during the puja. For example, someone mentioned the citrus as a prasad.
Hmm.
Is there like a reason why? And I mean, we know it, but maybe we can explain it. And also, what else can we not offer to Shimadaji, like a certain flower, a certain
Yeah.
thing?
Well, the citrus fruit was Shimataji told us that because citrus has the ability to suck the negativity as well.
Mm.
That's why you use a lemon or lime. But even an orange has the ability to suck negativity. So so the citrus was in that aspect. But obviously the bananas was where Shimataji told Antonio that, you know, bananas was considered, as poor man's fruits,
Mm.
very poor, so you wouldn't offer that to the goddess, you
Oh
know.
wow.
Yeah. So, but of course, I mean, even today, it is a very, very cheap fruit. I mean, you
Yeah.
pick it up at every supermarket. They
Yeah.
they have abundance of it, and not very tasty, but abundance. But so that's why these two fruits weren't offered, you know.
Wow.
I mean, and with flowers, of course, some say coronation and what have you, that because of the whole aspect of when the Shiva Linga appeared and Sri Brahma and Sri Vishnu had a bet, who will find the bottom or the top. So, and Sri Vishnu went downwards and Sri Brahmadeva went upwards. And so the flower, which was um, coronation, agreed to say a lie, and that's why they say you shouldn't worship,
Oh wow.
But I think, with Mother's incarnation, all that has disappeared, all that has been dissolved
Mm.
personally. I mean, the other one was, what's them? Oh God, let's see, I can't think of the name of the plant now. It just wouldn't come to me. They they grow, on
Like
trees sometimes.
the tulipans,
Huh? No,
no.
no, they grow on trees. They actually don't root anywhere in the ground. They kind of like just orchids.
Orchids.
Okay.
Orchids were something a little bit, was mentioned, but I can't say, definitely Mother said, "Oh, you should never put orchids," but it was mentioned that because I think it doesn't root in the ground, it just roots
Mm.
itself. It's like a pest,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
I see.
But still, I think with love and devotion, all that is nothing compared to doing something silly in puja, like
Yeah.
answering the mobile phone and talking to your friend while it's all
Yeah.
going on. You know, I think that's probably a lot worse.
Yes. Yes. On a not so subtle point, but very practical one, I also noted this, which I found interesting. There's certain pujas, for example, like the Easter puja,
Yeah,
um, where and it is cute. Everybody think it's super cute to bring like egg chocolates or
oh
like
yeah,
stuff like that. But if you have kids
yes,
and they're gonna have like these 6 kilos of chocolate to eat for the next 3 weeks, I think again, a collective level, practical level, we need to be a bit wiser. And this is, of course, not an offense to the gods, but like common sense for the collective to not exaggerate with stuff. Because
mm,
actually, I've heard a lot of parents that the 2 weeks after Easter Puja is a disaster because the kids there went
yeah,
crazy. They take the extra prasad, they bring it home, and you can never finish that much. So
no,
it's
no.
cute, but let's be a bit more
Yeah.
practical about it.
Well, you see, in England, what we try and mention for puja is that if you can bring homemade prasad,
Yeah.
you know, because prasad, it's an offering to the goddess in order for you to get vibrated something back. And you want something that you created, the Lakshmi aspect, that benevolence that comes
Yeah.
from you making. And normally when people do make things, they make things, not so sweet and
Yeah.
full of sugars and
Yeah.
full of wrong things. They're normally a lot more natural. So
Yeah.
we do off say, if you bring homemade prasad, you know, that's always welcomed.
An ideal. Exactly.
Of course, and the thing is that the other thing is that with prasad, which is fundamental, is that prasad is a gift back from God. But the true prasad is the vibrations that we get after the puja. Now, when you sit down after the puja and there's that silent meditation, that's the prasadana, where you get the
Yes.
vibrations flow. And like Shamashi says, sometimes, after puja, you don't feel like eating because you're so satisfied.
It's true.
So in that way, so a symbolic morsel that you take, it's just, that's all it is. It's symbolic. It's it's a manifestation of love that's been given, and it manifests as that sweet or that chana, or
Yeah.
that you can, and that's all really, in real terms, that's what the prasadana is
Yeah.
the vibrations that you suck and and, and
To
have
absorb.
after. So yeah, chocolates and things, and over sugary things, it's because people purchase things, they go and buy things. And it doesn't really show the aspect of Lakshmi in a lot of ways, because
Yeah.
you're just buying things. Of course, you can't make flowers. You have to buy flowers,
Yeah.
well and good, and you can make them as an offering, because there's something, you can't just produce unless you got green fingers. But prasad is like that, if more people participating in making an offering of their homemade and less of the purchased, then you'll find, our diabetes will be at zero.
I mean,
And
is the same thing for the bananas because it's also like really cheap to get like already products that are like already made in the factories. So
of
it's like
course,
the same thing. So it's
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
very, very similar to that. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's on the prasad aspect,
I think
but can I
also, and
ask you
go Lele, go.
on, on the girls side because we've been asked I would say three questions about the girls side. First of all, why are there 7 or 9 married ladies for the Devi Puja? What is the reason for women to cover their heads during the puja, or at least when they go like they do the harti or when they go like to the stage? And when why do the yoginis serve the prasad after the meeting? I've never seen like boys, for example, and doing that. And how come?
So let's start. I mean, first of all, of course, wider number. Now, there's no stated fact why 7, 9. It was Shemataji that called, and I think that's about the right number in order to be able to handle uh, everything you need. For example, you won't overcrowd the stage.
The
If you had
stage. Yeah.
13, for example, if you had 15, it's just overcrowded. So I think, in practicalities, again, Shamaji would have 7 ladies. 7 will be the number of the chakras. I suppose
Right.
it reflect with everyone. 9 ladies, the goddess is 9 times.
Yeah.
The 9 goddesses in the Navaratri aspect. You see, so it just derived from that. But I think it's handleable. You can
Yeah.
handle 7 to 9 ladies quite easily and comfortably, and not overpowering the stage. And now the covering of the head is a very, obviously there's a modesty behind it, but also it can be a burden for women, because the saris, sometimes there are silk, they're heavy silk, they keep falling down. Now, the main thing is you have to be comfortable when you're offering puja. If you can put, the veil over your head and clip it and you're okay, but you're not going to keep fiddling and fiddling and fiddling, you know, then do it. But if you can't, if it keeps falling, just hold it over your shoulders and tuck it into your waist. And then you can perform the puja without having your attention going up and down and up and down and round and round. So the practicality of it is that where's your attention? Keep your attention on the job that you're about to perform, on
Yeah.
that aspect in which you're trying to invoke. You're trying to invoke the Devi, you're trying to invoke the Krishna within that Devi, or, the Hanuman within that Devi. So keep your attention there rather than the veil has to be up or has to be down or has to,
Yeah.
In practicality there is a modesty behind the thing, but in practicality you have to keep your attention steady. It's like Shamashi says, you could sit on the floor, but we don't have to be lotus, one foot over the other and the other foot over the other and just sit there like
Yeah.
an ancient yogi. No, be comfortable. Be comfortable. And then the Kundalini just flows. And the same way as that. So on the 9 ladies, 7 ladies, and the veiling I would say that's my interpretation of it.
Uh, this is a bit connected, but not. I think also I've heard from a few people that it was encouraged, maybe especially at the beginning, also for ladies to always have the hair tight and kind of collected and not floating around.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. I mean, Shamaji also said it with the boys, disheveled hair is, it's
exactly.
not to
Also
be.
the beards.
Shave properly. Exactly.
Shave properly
So,
the beard.
it's really, disheveled hair is a kind of a disrespect, in a way. So, and also, in practicalities as well, if it keeps fraying here and fraying there and,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so the practicalities of it is the same, in the sense that, if you have it nicely combed back, oiled, or, clipped back, in yourself, you're comfortable. You don't have to worry. You can just carry on with the flow of the puja without having to have your attention on something as silly as hair.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So,
I mean, ultimately, the essence of the discourse is that because Lele is right. Same, I guess, is with the boys, right? You should
yeah,
shave or have a very well cultivated beard, right? Like, as in, how do you present yourself to the god? You're going on the stage, you're doing some. How do you present? One, and
mm,
two. I guess that's a very nice point you make, Uncle, which is, you know be collected, be fixed, so that you can do what you came here for, which is receive vibrations. Like, have everything else settled, everything else proper, so
yeah.
that you can come
Um,
for what you came for, right? You can do what you came for, which is
you come to make an
get
offering.
vibrations.
You come there, and you gonna offer the Amrut, and there you are, a guy, with your pants half down and your shirt. It just, for you, you feel uncomfortable. For you, you feel out of place. So then, your whole thing becomes a little bit
And
shaky.
actually, it distracts everybody else too. If you think, if you're
Well,
in
of
the
course,
front and you
of
are
course,
improper, or you have your
yeah.
thing going all over the place.
Yeah, it distracts, but also
Exactly.
it's a test. It's a test for us all to, to be able to witness and
Yes.
let go, and because, well, again, from London's point of view or UK point of view, we're from the Shiva Bhakta, so there's a lot of elements of allowing, just let things flow. If somebody's coming, from the heart, you let things flow. You don't get disturbed so much. You do work, you suck that Shiva Tattva, where
Yeah.
that attachment is, so, it's okay, it's between them and God, you know. So Yeah, so a lot of the times like that, but for your own self-esteem, and it's better to groom yourself a little bit and make yourself a little bit presentable, that
Yeah,
you yourself, when you go up, you feel, you can present yourself. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And should
Okay.
we also dress like wear kurtas in like accordingly to the
Oh no,
deity that
no,
we are worshipping? Or
no, not so much. I mean, as pujaris, as you can see, most of them, they do have an elegance with their things, and it's lovely to allow people to express themselves in different ways. Of course, Shamattaji at that point on stage, where whatever aspect, that's different. You do make different choices for the sari, you different choices in the offerings that you make. If it was Guru Puja, for example, your offerings will be completely different.
Yeah,
You would have the kumbala, which is the vessel that holds the water, and then the beads, and sometimes we used to offer like the rock salt, or salt, you
yeah,
know which represents the ocean and the sustenance of holding everything together, within the ocean. So Shamattaji herself, yes, there are different things in that aspect, where you offer. But as pujaris, they're normally well clean and groomed, and they look in their own sphere, in their own colours, and it's lovely, it's okay.
yeah. I
Mm.
think again there's which links to the next question. There is a collective element also. I feel actually last week my wife a little bit scolded me because I was going to the program and I was tired and we were a bit late, and I just wear my sweatpants and my I looked like a 15 years old, and and she looked at me very sweet. She's like, "So, would you like to change?" uh, and of course, I was like, "No." And then a few minutes passed by, and she's like, "So you're going to wear that for the program?" And at the end, actually, I didn't manage to change because I was too stubborn. But I thought
Yeah.
about it once I was there, and I was like, without becoming fanatic, without becoming, extreme, but it is actually uh, we are all cells to a body, right? So
Mm.
the better and best we can represent ourselves and be ourselves and take seriously our commitment to not just the puja, but like to the Saturday meeting or to when you go give sufferization, the more you will inspire people around you. For example, in the best collectives I've been, one of them actually in New Jersey for this point, I brought a friend in Sahaj, and I didn't explain to her about boyfriend, girlfriend, nothing. But she saw how people acted in
Yep.
the collective and she understood everything.
Yep.
And she started commenting on that. She's like, "Oh, I didn't know those two people were married because they were never next to each other." And you did not have to explain, because if everybody behaves up here,
That's
we
right.
all are up here, right?
Mm.
And then
And that's
you don't need the police to go
no,
around and telling people what to do.
absolutely. Where you go to a program and you can see the ladies on one side and the guys on the other, people immediately have an understanding. There's a dharma,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know. So it's a kind of a something that it's ingrained within us. But they don't mention it. But I've heard the same thing when they came to programs, where they saw that and they realize, that these this is there's a dharma to this,
Yeah.
and also it removes all the these things of maybe they're looking for their Mr. Right or their
Yeah.
Mrs.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
kind of removes that too. So if you do have a system where you're dressed according to smartish, what I mean, your own smart, not everyone has to be with suits and
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
but also just the fact that the program separation of the ladies and men also has an influence in
Yeah.
in the understanding of the dharma, That's why puja is very important, to separate. Women should sit on the women's side and men should sit on the men's side. It's
Yeah,
very, very important because it holds dharma, you
yeah,
know, and the dharma is very important because it becomes, like we said about the children wash Mataji's feet, having this fragrance. It's something beyond your senses. It just, you kind of emotionally understand that there is that dharma, and that dharma is eternal. It's not
yeah.
external. It's
It's,
internal.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
clear within you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Actually, talking of this, there was a very important question of which I had a very big experience, I must say. I will first share the question, then the experience, and then I'll open it up to you, Uncle. But so one question was like it was twofold. Let's say one is sometimes we assume because our kids are born in Sahaj that innately they know everything, and actually they don't. So session like this where you actually should also literally spell verbally what is to be done, what is not to be done. For example,
Mm.
even with my kids, this happens. Papa, I have to go to the bathroom. Wait till Shimaji's speech is finished. Like, no
Mm.
matter how much you need to go, you will not get up till the speech is finished. Like, there is certain things that should be like the ABC explained very well. And again, it's not because they realized that they know the practical, things of the puja. Point one. Point two is it's actually difficult at certain ages to uh, be involved and connected with the puja because maybe you have a weak attention span. And these I've seen myself actually. I think it was a puja sometime last year. Usually I don't sit in the front, but I am in the hangar in Cabela, like somewhere in the hangar. And
Yeah.
I've never really sat outside or in the back because I always try to go there early, sit down. But I remember one time I was alone, I had no kids, nothing, and I felt sometimes, when you go to Cabela, you enjoy so much the collective and the people that you
Yeah.
don't really meditate because you're like, So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go all the way at the back, beyond the anger. I want to have a puja alone when I don't say hi to anyone. And so
Yeah.
I tried this for the first time in my life. I go all the way, like I was by the road, like as
Yeah.
far as possible you can go. But it was so interesting because as I was walking away from the anger, I could see the level of attention plummeting down on the people around me. And literally, in the anger in the front, you have people watching. Then you go a bit back, there is already people a bit more distracted, some kids snacking, some kids drawing. Then you go outside, and then outside, okay, the kids are still moving, but the parents are trying to. Then you go a bit more back, there's people playing basketball. And then you go a bit more back, there is football, and there's teenagers with their phones. Like to me it was a shock. I was absolutely shocked. And I sat actually next to a group of it was very sweet. It was little Italian kids. It was like 5 6 of them, teenagers. And I sat behind them, and I knew a few of them. They were on their phone in the middle of the puja. And then they looked at me, quickly put the phone away. And I made my bad uncle face. I'm like, yeah, exactly. But jokes aside, I was actually shocked. And what I feel is I think we as parents, me and my wife, we are even a bit too much on our kids because they sit with us. I mean, they're 10 and 13 now, but we make them sit with us all the time. Meditation, puja, like we like to help them and keep an eye on them. But I'm thinking if my kids is 13 alone and is sitting in there in the back and everybody's playing hoops and and he has
Yeah.
no chance to follow
No.
the puja. No, it's impossible. So I don't know how to solve this, but because of course there might be people that joined Sarge recently or that they were never told, or I don't know. It's not even the kids' fault because I don't know. I feel if you're left alone all the way back there, at least my kids, they will have no chance to follow if everybody else is playing and doing things.
Mm.
So, but these things are kind of serious and to be looked after. I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult one because obviously you're right to try and maintain your own family and your own things, because sooner or later the benefits they will understand,
Yeah.
eventually. Obviously, like, you know, over strict or under strict, whatever. The parents are the parents. You're the guardian. You have to do what you have to do. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's a lot of parents who don't have that guardianship, who do get dominated by the kids. They
Yeah.
don't want to meditate. And so, and they don't really want to be there. They're bored and what have you. So, so for them, they go to the puja and they leave the kids outside and roam and
Yeah.
what have you. And at least they get a puja, they get
Yeah.
something. But the kids,
Yeah.
but there's no way of, it's something that, I guess it's an evolutionary process that we're going to have to work our way through and try and somehow, these kids, to soothe them down as time goes by.
Yeah.
But there, there's no clear answer to that. It is sometimes we make pujas far too
Yeah.
laborious,
That's another aspect.
uh,
Yeah.
and far too long. Because for example, you're sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally, somebody comes and, yeah, we're ready for puja. Then somebody decides to do a meditation, you know, and wants to take us deep into you know, and then, half an hour later, no wonder why the kids can get a bit
Yes.
frustrated,
Yes.
because, sometimes people overdo things. They don't understand the simplicity
Yeah.
of the worship, so you welcome mother and then, go straight into the puja and the offerings, and things. So it's a difficult one, because there are some people that overcook,
Yes.
and
It
and
doesn't make things easy. Yeah.
yeah. So we're still in the process of understanding and learning and detaching from
Absolutely.
these things. And but of course, in summertime, it's much harder, in Cabela
Yeah.
for kids, because everybody goes there and it's like a holiday camp, and so it becomes very
Yeah.
difficult. But I remember one Sajogi, in UK, that was Easter Puja 1990 in Eastbourne. He said, okay, Shamaji said, you know even if you're at the back, what I mean, you get vibrations. And he thought he'll try it. He went at the back of the hall and sat, and he said he just got the blast of his life,
Wow.
on vibrations. So it can be there, the energy, the vibrations, is how to tune and turn away and remove the distractions,
Yeah.
So just like your thoughts in your mind, not this,
Absolutely.
not this,
Absolutely.
and you know but anyway, so that was a little story where he got a complete blast.
Yeah. No, and also, sorry, just to close the circle on that one. I think there's two other elements. One is that the important to be that makes it complex is that actually also many times the parents of those kids are puja organizers or hosting countries. So it's not like they're twirling around. They're actually working for the collect. This also happened to
Yeah,
me sometimes that both me and my wife were doing something, either for
yeah,
the puja or for the collective. And inevitably your kids, quote and unquote, suffers your lack of being there. So that's why it's difficult to handle point one. But the other point is this: we often also say with Matteo, and Lele will laugh because he says that at least once in every podcast I need to bring education or children or parenting into it.
I
yeah,
was
This is
about to do that. I was
this,
about to do that.
this is the time that is coming in. No, but with Matteo we often say that the principle of Cabela, that we do a lot of workshop for children and yuvas, but we don't do workshop for parents. And those are
yeah,
important too. And because I've noticed even myself, I don't know if it's in your case this like this, but for example, I noticed in the early times of Sahaj when I was in Rome, children and yuvas, be it a puja, be it a meditation, whatever it was, sat in the very front. Like inarguably, like that was it. It was natural, mandatory, and I've heard that Shimaji was very pleased with that, seeing the children in the front, the viewers in the front. Now you see 17-year-old kids sitting on the chairs in the back, and you're like, yo, what are you, 50? Get onto the floor, including my kids. If I give them the chance, they will always be at the back. So even now in Switzerland, we have a few kids of close to teenage, and we talk to the parents. We're like, hey guys, let's all sit in the front. 2, 3 of us adults can be with the kids, but let's have the kids in the very front. And every time we do that, the vibration just go up. The kids' attention just goes incredibly up. But why I'm saying all of this, because actually it doesn't come naturally. You have to make an effort. Because if you want to make the kids sit in the front, you have to come 10 minutes earlier. Right? You cannot be late, because otherwise so it takes coordination. It takes 2, 3 parents to say, okay, this time I'm gonna sit with all of them, with a group of 6, 7, and look after them, and then it works very properly. But it's a coordinated, conscious effort of the collective, and the parents are saying, yes, we want to give these kids the best chance to grow well in Sahaj, and let's put some effort into it. Right? It's not a given. It's something that needs to be worked out.
Yeah, I agree. It needs to be worked out. But I mean, on Navaratri, when we have Navaratri, naturally, a lot of the youngsters are kids. Even if they're late, they will come at the front and sit down and squash in. They don't care.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, but of course, it is cooler months, and so you find that the messing around is not so much. The atmosphere of holidaying, and
Yeah.
so we tend to find them that they do gather there. But also, like I said, if you're hanging around for an hour and then others do other things in between, you're sitting there an hour and a half before, even if you say the swagata, and you are actually helping the process of kids getting fed up and bored. There's a two-way understanding here, where yes, we do need to make an effort to discipline and bring them more to the front, but at the same time, the organizers need to understand that kids attention span, and even the sage yogis, there's a limit to
Yeah.
how long you hold them there, because actually that's what you are doing, because Shemataji is not holding them there, it's us, but because we could start straight away,
Yeah.
she's informless. Soon as you swagata,
Yeah.
a form comes, so it's a two-way, and it needs a bit more of a time to work
Ma-
out. But of course, parenting is a very important aspect, and parenting, you know, but again, some of them, they got their hands tied up because the kids don't want to listen, and
yeah.
but
My,
it's
my,
but
my
another,
old. Yeah.
you know if you look at all organizations, and you find that I don't find so many organizations where they involve children as like Sajoga,
Yeah.
because we involve them in puja.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, you'll have a choir, you know some boys and some girls, singing or whatever, but participating in involvement, so to me it feels like what Shemati's has created is also a thing where there are children involved, so we are going to have these
Absolutely.
situations to deal with, and it's going to take time for us to unravel ourselves and discipline ourselves in order we can discipline the kids as well, so we involve children, we do involve them and
Yeah.
put
Which
them
is
in
great.
there,
It's
you
true.
know so I don't see many of the other religion in that so much involved as
Yeah.
we do it, in that way.
Absolutely. Which again, I don't know if I'm mistaken, but I felt with many yogis I talked of old age that this is really what Shimaji wanted. Kids sit in the front. She wanted to see them. Even the entertainment nights often started with kids doing something. Like she really was
Yeah, yeah.
asking to bring their innocence forward and make them feel valuable.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth bringing that to the attention of organisers, and
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
definitely, you know,
Can I go back for 1 second? Because I would like to also add something to what Fabrizio said. Because it's true that in the front line, there is a certain level of attention. You go a little bit back and gets lower and lower. But also, there is a huge difference between the first line and the people on the stage. As soon as you get on the stage, there is like a completely different puja. And I noticed this like when I got like invited, I think maybe the first time that I got invited on the stage to do something with the other like uncles and older Yuva Shaktis. And in the moment, like I was given like weapons to do, like to pass it over and then do something. And I was like, okay, I've never seen this in my life. I barely know what I'm doing, and why is this so different right now? Beside like another day that I went there in another puja, and this also leads to another question that we have: is that do we have different protocols for different pujas? Like, are pujas different from each other?
yeah. Well, first of all, of course, we all knew that, in Mother's presence and around Mother, the vibrations were tremendous, you know. But also on puja stage, you'll find that the pujaris are very concentrated.
yeah,
There's one thing in their minds is the puja and the the flow of the puja, and how so the concentration is also very much absorbed at Shrimatiji's feet, and Shrimatiji herself. So the intensity would be there because of the intensity of the devotion that's we on there, and even when people come up for the amruts or the offerings, they feel, like they're walking towards the
yeah,
wall of vibrations, and and that's why it's always great to experience, sometimes to offer something to Mother, you know, because you feel like you walked into a vortex of vibrations, So that's that aspect, there's a massive concentration of it there. So now, what's the second part of your question? Sorry.
it was asking if
The
there are
difference
different.
between the pujas, if there is.
Yeah, well, I mean, there isn't, obviously most of the pujas are all very much similar format. All of the pujas are similar format, apart from Shivaratri puja. The only thing, of course, is the whole essence of the whatever puja you're doing is that when you're doing the Devi aspect of the puja, you're also trying to invoke the deity who you're worshipping at that time. And that is because you need to think about this before you come to that puja, because the organizers need to know, what is that deity? Who is that deity? What does he like? What is the essence is? What is, the vehicle? What's his, his appearance? And that in itself will help to find little gifts or little things that will enhance
Yeah,
at the end of that puja, when you're adorning the Devi and you offer, like you offer a peacock feather, you offer a flute, or you offer the kandala, with for the Guru puja, and with the beads, the Rakta beaders, and things like that. That in itself will pull out the deity out of the Devi, because everything's in Mother.
yeah,
So what you're doing is that you're worshiping, but you're sucking that deity out of her. So you want to suck all, that deity. And when you suck that deity out of her, you please her. And she obviously showers us with the vibrations which flow from that deity, So that's so most of them are all very much similar. You make different offerings for different ones, for different deities according to their attributes, But Shiva Puja is, it's completely different, And the way we tend to do it in UK, it's I've noticed that, you know, we have a much shorter puja than most, because what we do in the Shiva puja, you know, we obviously invite mother the same way, you know, and listen to a talk, and then we have the washing of Shrimatiji's feet at that point. But then from there on, once we wash Shrimatiji's feet, we also will do the Gauri Puja. We wouldn't do the Amarut. Now, the Amarut is made differently. Now, this was told by Shrimatiji to Antonio, the difference in the Amaruts, you know, and we create that separately and offer it at the Shiva aspect, you know, and I'll tell you that in a minute. So then we get the Gauri, because it's very important to worship Gauri with Shiva, because you got the Ganesha aspect, but then you got the, you know, the mother of the universe, who is, you know, the Gauri. You know, Parvati
Yeah.
was the Gauri who gave life to Sri Ganesha. So it's very important to worship. So once we've decorated mother's feet, you know, and we got mother's picture, which is ordinary picture of Shrimataji in a Devi form or whatever you, then we get a white cloth, hold this white cloth. Men, only men come on the stage, and they'll hold a white cloth, you know, up, and we'll change all the photographs. So we'll change the photograph of Lord Shiva. We'll remove mother's feet and put Lord Shiva's feet on the side, and then we offer the cloth on the photograph, you know, on Lord Shiva. And then we'll have a different things like the Geru, which is an earth, um,
Yeah. Is that the one that goes to the?
yeah, goes across the forehead
Yeah.
and Lord Shrimataji's feet. So we decorate mother's forehead with Geru, mother's feet with Geru. And then this is where, obviously, in the West, we offer uh, the rose leaves, you know, the rose leaves that have, they're in three, they're in the, you know, the triangular shape, you know,
Yeah.
trident shape. So we break them off well before and put them all into a bowl. And then the men, after painting mother's feet, would offer the leaves. Okay. So we wouldn't do a Devi Puja in between. We would go from Ganesha, Gauri, straight to Shiva.
Mm.
So straight away, you know, we'll be addressing Lord Shiva, because Humanities did say, you know, Shiva puja is very, very simple. It's one of the simplest pujas,
Yeah.
because what's he need? He doesn't need anything, you know. So we do, you know, we do all these for our own benevolence, you know. So then we offer these rose leaves, and we put them, we put them on our hands upside down, and then when you place on mother's feet, they're the right way up, you know. So you'd offer, and everybody would offer simultaneously and keep offering until there's no leaves. Then we offer some coconuts with raw mangoes, you know, and that may be 12, 13, you know, whatever mangoes and whatever things. And then, of course, the trident, the beads, you
Yeah.
know, the Raksha Bidras and the Damarud, maybe the snake, maybe the moon. If you've made a moon, you could offer something. And then the Amarut with because at Shiva Puja, you don't offer fruits. We don't offer the bowl of fruits. We
Yeah.
offer the dried fruits and dried nuts. So we just offer one bowl of dried fruits and dried nuts with a coconut and rice onto that. And the Amrit is made up of rose petal jam, uh, peeled almonds,
Yeah.
cashew nuts, concentrated milk, condensed milk. And then what we do, we add milk also to thin it down, because it's really lumpy. So the cashew nuts and the almonds would get crushed. So you make them into powder.
Okay.
Okay, powderish. It doesn't have to be complete powder. It can be little lumpy. It doesn't matter, you know. So you'd offer these four elements, which is the rose petal jam, the almonds, the cashew nuts, and then the condensed milk. And then with that, you'd add a little bit of milk to make it fluidly, make it a little bit more fluid.
Yeah.
And that is the offerings of the Amaret, and we offer that in a bowl at Shimataji's feet, Lord Shiva's feet at that moment. And then we'll obviously distribute it. So in a way, from what we do in that way, the puja is very concise, but incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
And so, and I see people that, they tend to do a Devi puja in between, and and um, and it's fine, if that's where they flow like that. It sounds okay if they're used to it, but it's kind of cumbersome because Shiva puja is very, very simple. It's an incredibly deep and you know effortless thing to do, and so it becomes quite fluidly and very, very simple. Goes from one aspect. The Gauri aspect is where you worship in the Devi anyway. You're worshiping a Devi because that's who she is. She's
Yeah.
Gauri, you know, and
Yeah.
then Shiva, who is she's the aspect with everything. So Shiva's the one that's a little bit different than all,
Particular.
completely
Yeah.
different, to be honest. To completely honest, and it really works, in a profound way, where you don't have so much cumbersome, seven ladies holding saris, and then after that you got seven men holding sari, and then
Yeah.
redressing. It really is fluid,
Yeah.
and it feels very auspicious, but
Which
that's the one that's completely, you know away from the others, completely different than all the others. The others are very similar. You have the washing of mother's feet, the Amrut, then you have the Gauri aspect, and the Devi aspect where you're bringing a deity in what you're worshipping, with all the offerings. And the offerings, of course, a big bowl of fruits. And we offer oti, we offer dried fruits and nuts. And like I said, yeah, the oti becomes where the dry fruits and nuts with a coconut, and then the the um, the blouse piece. That's it.
yeah.
Blouse piece goes with that and gets offered as the end, part of the end. So yeah.
I
So
mean the
is the
sorry
one that's completely different.
the ultimately a bit also to wrap it up. What is come out a lot today from you, uncle, is that the words flow, attention, essence. Uh, it really it feels as, I mean, I guess everybody already suspected that while there are a few strict rules, for example, ladies on
Mm,
one side, boys on the other,
mm.
uh, don't offer things with plastic. There is some
Yeah,
unquestionable rules to it,
yeah.
but everything else is really a matter of connection, right? Because
Mm,
you could do all the right things and not be connected, and there
yeah,
won't be vibrations. And you can do maybe a minor mistake here and there, but if your heart is there, if you've set yourself to where you need to be, and everybody else is working toward that goal, that's the puja, right? Ultimately, that's it.
yeah. Remember what I said about, us being on stage and collectively we
Yeah.
forgot to offer the Amaret. Now, so when you become one in the moment, and you're fully concentrated, you know, the so-called mistakes actually may not be a mistake, maybe just
Yeah, it's
point
true.
is not required, and you learn that, but also you can see how sometimes the pujaris become so concentrated in what they're doing that they become one with the scenario, with the puja, with
Yeah.
Shmataji, and the guidance become divine, you know, uh, you know, And we do mess around a bit and play a bit, between ourselves. We do tend to pull each other's legs with
Uh-huh.
different
Uh,
things, because after all, mother's forever, pl- she's forever playing, and in that play she relaxes you, and within that relaxation, the things flow, the energy flows, love
yeah.
flows, connections,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
camaraderie between brothers and sisters. Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah. So yeah, so it's like that. It's pretty straightforward in the run. Like you said, there are four major aspects in the puja. After the welcoming and the speech, you got the Ganesha aspect, you got the Amrut, you have the Gauri and the Devi, and it's pretty straightforward. And within that, it's up to the individuals or the organizers to how to invoke the deity whom you are worshipping that on that day, how to invoke that deity. And that's something that it's not a protocol, it's something that you have to do soul investigation you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
and for example, one time I went off and I wanted to offer Shiva Puja and a perfume, and I thought, I'm going to buy amber, because amber is not perfumey. It's more woody and what have you. And when I purchased the amber, my goodness, my kundalini was blowing out of my head. All I did is purchased from this guy, and I couldn't believe, so the intention of,
Yes.
created that blast of, and
Yes.
that's what you want. With that blast, it will reflect when you offer that at the puja,
Yeah.
and it will enhance the aspect, and give you what that deity is full of, which is vibrations and love,
Wow.
you know. Yeah.
So I feel like wrapping up, but there is only one last question that like I just read, and I think that is just really interesting just to talk about it really rapidly, and is the more frequent use of padukas instead of the photo of the feet.
Mm, yeah.
Is there like a reason why? Is there?
No, I mean, I've actually I've wrote a letter and sent it all, to the country coordinators about this, because during COVID I saw this phenomena, and I saw it, in other countries too, the same thing, and it's very, very clear to me that, if you worship, if you do puja to Shrimatiji's image of her feet, it's far more powerful. And also, there's been a recollection from Yogi Mahajan, I think it was, that where he expressed it, and from the experience with Shrimatiji herself, there is something he recollected and wrote about, and I think he even spoke about it, how important it was, because the padukas, they may be used by Shrimatiji and they'll have vibrations, but they can't cleanse you. Okay, but mother's feet and her image can. Her image can actually cleanse you and purify you, and can work your system, where these objects are objects, and even though they have vibrations, but that's as far as it goes. So when you offer puja, it's it's invaluable that you use mother's feet, and you use, there's no excuse anymore. Now we have the two glass, where Shrimatiji's pictures within two glass and sealed, and you can wash them, you can bathe them, you can pour amrut, you can wash and rub and scrub, and they still perfectly. But the vibrations that come from that, and Shmatiji has said, because photographs have the five elements, because they have the five elements, they can admit, and it's reality. You know, they're not just a photograph. It's like you look at Shmataji's photograph, in the frame, and you go, "Oh, Shmataji's photograph." Well, where's I don't know where your depth is, because when you look and you get sucked and drawn in, So yes, no, no. So I think in Yogi Mahajan he explains it very, very well about the Padukas, and how Shmataji herself conveyed to him about the reason why it's not so good at using Padukas to do puja. It's actually the photograph is what works, and what does the job. And that's the important thing. They do the job, you know. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Fabi, should we wrap it up? I think we've been talking for like 1 hour and a half. I don't know if you have any question.
No, I was actually writing down and reading. I think we literally covered everything. Also, we can, if we forgot anything, our listeners can let us know, and we can do another episode with all the questions we might have missed.
And don't forget, I'm going to send you a booklet, Puja
Yes,
Yeah.
Protocol booklet, so that your listeners can ask you, and you can.
exactly, exactly. And maybe actually to close it up, it is a bit what, at least on my side, what we were talking at the beginning of the before we start recording, Uncle, which is it's actually very difficult, is not, if not impossible, to start writing a
Hmm,
precise and detailed book about protocol, because you don't want it to become the Bible that binds and restricts creativity and devotion. I think that's the way you put it. And on the other hand, again, while maintaining the basics, I think that's what we want people to take away from this episode at the end, right? Is that while there are certain things, again, don't use plastic during puja, be presentable,
hmm,
respect God, be, and so on and so forth. But really seek in your heart the best possible way to be devotional, and to present yourself to your mother. Ultimately, that's the essence, and
yeah.
that cannot be easily put into a book. On the contrary, the book can give you inspiration, but it's really for you to connect and find that
Hmm.
inspiration in yourself.
I was also saying before we came on air that how valuable it is to watch.
Yes.
People come up to the puja, and they want to get involved, but actually it's much more valuable to just observe, watch how they put things together, watch how, because when you're doing something, you're engrossed in that one thing, but
Yes.
when you're watching the whole thing. So
Yes.
when you sit back and you just watch and see, you may ask a question here and there, but observe,
Yeah.
so it's the different elements, the different things, how things are placed, and how we don't step over puja
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and things like that, and when you watch and observe, you pick up so much of that
Absolutely.
understanding and knowledge, and a few times, then you feel that you've gathered
Yeah.
significant information, overall, not just in making a kumbha. I paint a swastika on, and you made a kumbha, but you haven't seen the rest being created.
Yeah.
So observing and watching is always how,
Beautiful.
you know, you know.
Beautiful. So on this note, for me, that's all. Thank you so much, Uncle. It was so lovely to hear all these nice stories.
Sweet. And in that little booklet, it has a lot of things about, how to be, and, the different protocols and things from Shmataji's words.
Very
So,
nice.
yeah.
Very nice.
So I'll send it to you guys, and you can distribute as will.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well, it's a very difficult subject, and it's very hard to put it into a context which, it may help. The reason is, like you said, you don't want it to become ritualistic. So it has to have a fluidity to it. It has to have a mystery to it,
Yeah.
because after all, Saj Yoga is a discovery, you know, and that's the richness of it, you know, for you to go out and discover what is, you know, the yoti, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Well, you can find out. It take, you know, and that's, you know, when you have that desire to find out something, vibrations,
Yeah.
things flow in you, you know, an urge and a hunger, a oneness, you know. So yeah,
Beautiful.
so I sent you the book.
Okay. Okay, so I think that on this we can wrap it up. Thank you really much, Uncle, for being available and for sharing so much knowledge about this topic, for sending us the book, and also for the future episodes. If you're interested, we can dive a little bit more. We can go a little bit more in depth, also talking about your stories with Shimadaji, which was like something planned for the episode, but it's been 1 hour and 30 minutes. And thank you, Fabrizio, for coming back for your monthly episode, so which made it longer with
Yeah.
your stories and
Of course.
non-dreams, of course. So I really hope that you guys liked this episode, and this was a Hatch Times podcast. Bye, everyone.
Good
Thank
night. Thank
thank
you.
you.